My daughter Vanessa laughed at my cooking for years, but the night she mocked my late husband's favorite beef stew in front of everyone, something inside me finally broke. She wonders why Dad had cholesterol problems, she joked, clinking her wine glass while her wealthy friends laughed at my table. The room went silent. My son stared at his plate. My youngest daughter looked ready to cry, and I just stood there in my old kitchen, holding the serving spoon so tightly my hand hurt. That night, after 40 years of Sunday family dinners, I quietly decided Vanessa would never be invited back again. She thought she was insulting food. She had no idea she was destroying the last thing holding this family together. If you've ever been hurt by someone you loved most, I'd really like to hear your story. Don't forget to like and subscribe if emotional family stories like this speak to you. And before we continue, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. I always read your comments. My name is Nicole Black. I'm 67 years old, widowed, and living alone in the same small brick house in Dayton, Ohio, where I raised my children. Most mornings, my life is quiet. I wake up before sunrise because my body still remembers the schedule I kept for decades. I make coffee in the old machine Thomas bought me 23 years ago from a Sears that doesn't even exist anymore. I water the flowers on the porch. I feed the stray orange cat that visits my backyard every morning around 7. Then I sit in silence. People think silence feels peaceful when you get older. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it feels like grief echoing through empty rooms. My husband, Thomas Black, has been gone for 8 years now. Even saying that still feels unreal to me. 8 years. Sometimes I still catch myself turning toward the front door around 5:30 in the afternoon, expecting to hear his keys jingling. Thomas was the kind of man who made a home feel warm just by walking into it. Tall, calm, gentle voice, big laugh. He worked 35 years at a manufacturing plant outside town and never once complained about hard work. Every Friday night, he'd come home smelling like machine oil, and winter air kiss me on the forehead and ask the same question. "What's cooking?" Nick. Didn't matter if it was soup and grilled cheese or pot roast and mashed potatoes. He said it like I was serving a 5-star meal, especially on Sundays. Sunday dinners were sacred to Thomas. Every Sunday at 4 o'clock, sharp our dining table filled with food, noise, laughter, and stories. That tradition started when our children were little because money was tight back then. We couldn't afford vacations or expensive restaurants, so Thomas said family dinners would become our luxury instead. As long as we eat together, he used to say we stay together. Back then, I believed that with my whole heart. Maybe I still do. I had 3 children. Jason Black. My middle child is 42 now. He lives 20 minutes away with his wife and 2 boys. Jason has always been steady and kind, like his father. He works as an HVAC technician and never acts embarrassed about where he came from. Then there's my youngest, Rachel Black. Rachel teaches 2nd grade at an elementary school nearby. She's soft-hearted and emotional, the kind of woman who cries during holiday commercials and rescues injured birds from parking lots. She calls me almost every evening just to check if I've eaten dinner. And then there's Vanessa. My oldest daughter, Vanessa Blackwood, now after marrying Ethan Blackwood. When she was young, Vanessa was bright and ambitious. She always wanted more than this town could offer. More money, more elegance, more sophistication. She hated thrift stores, hand-me-down clothes, and old furniture even as a child. At 16, she told me she planned to leave Dayton forever. At 22, she did. Now, she lives in downtown Chicago in a luxury condo with marble countertops and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river. She works in corporate marketing. Ethan works in finance. Their entire lives look polished enough to belong in magazines. at least online. The strange thing is, Vanessa wasn't always ashamed of us. When she was little, she used to stand beside me in the kitchen, wearing one of Thomas's oversized aprons that dragged across the floor. She'd stir brownie batter with both hands and lick frosting off spoons when she thought I wasn't looking. "Mom," she once told me at age 9, "your chicken soup could make anybody feel better." I remember that because Thomas laughed and said, "See, even the kid knows your magic." Sometimes I wonder where that little girl disappeared to. Or maybe life simply taught her that love looks less valuable than wealth. After Thomas died, Sunday dinners became even more important to me. Grief changes a family. At first, it pulls everyone together. Then slowly, quietly, it starts pulling people apart. I was terrified that without Thomas holding us together, everyone would drift away into separate lives until holidays became awkward obligations instead of genuine gatherings. So, I kept cooking. Every Sunday, roast chicken, beef stew, cornbread, pot roast, homemade macaroni and cheese, peach cobbler in summer, turkey and stuffing during colder months. I cooked because it was the only thing I knew how to do to keep people close, and for a while it worked. Jason still came early to help set the table. Rachel brought flowers or dessert. The grandkids ran through the hallway laughing while old Motown songs played softly from my kitchen radio. But Vanessa changed after moving to Chicago. At first, it was small things. She started criticizing butter, then salt, then sugar, then portion sizes, then the furniture, then the curtains, then eventually, me. "You still cook like it's 1985, Mom. You know people don't eat carbs like this anymore, right? Everything here is so heavy." At first, she laughed when she said it, so everyone else laughed too, including me. That's the thing about humiliation when it starts slowly. You convince yourself it isn't real. You tell yourself they didn't mean it that way. You make excuses because the truth hurts too much. But over time, her comments became sharper, crueler. And every Sunday before dinner, I started feeling nervous in my own kitchen, checking the seasoning too many times, wondering what Vanessa would criticize next, changing recipes I'd cooked for 30 years because I suddenly felt ashamed of them. I remember one Sunday afternoon standing in the grocery store holding a package of butter in my hand for nearly 5 minutes, because I could already hear Vanessa's voice in my head. "Mom, do you know how unhealthy that is?" I put it back. Then I cried in my car afterward. It sounds ridiculous now. Crying over butter, but it was never really about butter. It was about slowly realizing your own child no longer sees value in the things that once made your family feel loved. And the worst part, I still kept setting a plate for her every Sunday. Because no matter how much Vanessa changed, some part of me kept believing the little girl in Thomas's oversized apron would come back someday. I just didn't realize how much damage hope could do before it finally breaks. The first time Vanessa openly mocked my cooking, we were sitting around my dining table eating meatloaf. Nothing fancy. Just the same recipe I'd been making since she was 12 years old. Jason had already gone back for seconds. Rachel was helping her youngest cut green beans into tiny pieces. The room smelled like warm gravy and fresh bread, and for a little while, everything felt normal again. Then Vanessa set her fork down and sighed dramatically. "Oh my God, Mom," she said, laughing lightly. "Do you still use real butter in mashed potatoes?" The table got quiet for a second. I smiled nervously. "Well, yes." Vanessa exchanged a look with Ethan. "That explains a lot." Ethan chuckled under his breath. Rachel immediately jumped in. "They taste good, though." "I'm not saying they don't taste good," Vanessa replied. "I'm saying this is why America has obesity problems." She laughed again after saying it like that somehow made it harmless. I remember looking down at my plate and suddenly losing my appetite. Jason tried changing the subject. So, Mom, you still planting tomatoes this year? But Vanessa wasn't finished. I'm serious, she continued. You know people cook healthier now, right? Air fryers exist for a reason. I laughed softly because everyone else seemed uncomfortable. You survived my cooking this long. Vanessa shrugged. Barely. Everyone forced small smiles after that, but the warmth in the room had changed, and somehow that became the pattern. Every Sunday, every meal, another comment, another joke, another reminder that the food I spent hours making for the people I loved had become a source of embarrassment to my own daughter. Sometimes it was subtle. These roles are very dense. Do you own any spices besides salt, Mom? Nobody under 70 eats casseroles anymore. Sometimes it was worse. One evening, I made fried chicken because the grandkids loved it. Vanessa stared at the platter like I'd placed poison on the table. You know, she said while sipping wine, there are entire documentaries about food like this. Jason rolled his eyes immediately. Can we just eat without turning dinner into a TED Talk? Vanessa ignored him. I'm just trying to help Mom evolve a little. Evolve. That word stayed with me all night, as if I were some outdated thing that needed improvement. Like an old appliance, or old furniture, or maybe just an old woman. The hardest part wasn't even the criticism itself, it was the way Ethan encouraged it. At first, Ethan seemed charming when Vanessa brought him home years ago. Expensive suits, perfect smile, smooth voice. The kind of man who always looked directly at you while speaking, which made him appear sincere. But over time, I noticed something. Ethan enjoyed making people feel smaller, especially people from backgrounds he considered beneath him. He never insulted me directly. Men like Ethan rarely do. Instead, he used politeness like a weapon. Oh, Nicole, this meal is certainly nostalgic. Wow, I haven't eaten food like this since college. This is very authentic Midwest comfort food. Everything sounded complimentary until you heard the tone underneath it. And Vanessa started sounding exactly like him. One Sunday afternoon, I spent nearly 6 hours cooking. Pot roast, honey carrots, homemade biscuits, apple pie from scratch. I even used the nice tablecloth Thomas and I bought during our 25th anniversary trip to Tennessee. I wanted everything perfect because Vanessa was bringing coworkers from Chicago who happened to be passing through town. I still don't know why I cared so much. Maybe mothers never stopped trying to earn love from their children. Her coworkers arrived dressed like they belonged in a magazine advertisement. Polished hair, designer boots, expensive watches. The women complimented the house politely. One of the men looked around my dining room and asked, Wow, how long have you lived here? 38 years, I answered proudly. Vanessa laughed softly. She refuses to update anything. Everyone chuckled politely. And just like that, the shame started creeping into my chest again. Dinner began normally enough. People ate, talked, laughed. Then one of Vanessa's co-workers took a bite of the pot roast and smiled. This is incredible. Before I could even say thank you, Vanessa spoke. Oh, trust me, everything tastes amazing. Your arteries just won't survive the experience. The table laughed. Not loudly, not cruelly, but enough. Enough for my face to burn. Enough for me to suddenly feel ridiculous standing there in my apron at 67 years old, trying to impress people who would never respect me anyway. Rachel immediately frowned. Vanessa, what she asked innocently. I'm joking. Jason put his fork down hard enough to make a noise. You joke about Mom every single dinner. Vanessa blinked. Oh, please. Everyone's so dramatic. Ethan smirked slightly but stayed silent. I quickly stood up. Does anybody want more tea? That's what I always did. Redirect. Smooth things over. Pretend nothing hurt. Because I was terrified that confrontation would ruin dinner completely. But deep down, dinners were already ruined. I just hadn't admitted it yet. Later that night, after everyone left, Rachel stayed behind to help clean the kitchen. She dried dishes while I wrapped leftovers in plastic containers. Finally, she looked at me carefully and asked Mom, "Why do you let her do that?" I kept my eyes on the sink. "She doesn't mean it." Rachel sighed softly. "Yes, she does." I stopped moving for a second. That sentence hurt because I knew Rachel was right. Still, I defended Vanessa. "She's stressed. Chicago is competitive. Her whole world is different now." Rachel shook her head. "No, Mom. Being successful doesn't turn kind people cruel." I didn't answer, because I didn't know how to. The truth was, I kept making excuses because the alternative was unbearable. If Vanessa truly meant those things, if she genuinely looked down on me, then maybe I had already lost my daughter years ago without realizing it. After Rachel left, I sat alone in the kitchen for almost an hour. The house was quiet except for the refrigerator humming softly. I stared at the leftover biscuits on the counter and suddenly remembered something Thomas once told me after Vanessa moved away. "She's trying too hard to become someone." At the time, I laughed and asked what he meant. Thomas shrugged. "People who are comfortable with themselves don't spend all their time proving they're better than where they came from." I wish he were alive now. Not because he would magically fix everything, but because Vanessa never acted this way around him. Thomas had a calm authority about him that kept people grounded. Even Vanessa softened around her father. After he died, something shifted. Like she decided the humble parts of her life could finally be erased. And unfortunately, I was one of those parts. Still, every Sunday I kept cooking, kept hoping, kept believing maybe the next dinner would feel different. Maybe Vanessa would compliment something. Maybe she'd remember who she used to be. Maybe she'd stop treating my love like something embarrassing. But hope can become dangerous when it keeps you accepting pain you should have walked away from long ago. And I was getting closer and closer to my limit. I just didn't know it yet. Thanksgiving used to be my favorite day of the year. Not Christmas, not birthdays, Thanksgiving. Because for one evening, my entire family sat under the same roof without distractions. No rushing to open gifts, no expensive expectations, just food stories and togetherness. At least that's how it used to feel. The Thanksgiving everything changed started at 5:30 in the morning. I remember because it was still dark outside when I tied my apron strings and turned on the kitchen lights. The house looked beautiful. I'd spent 2 days preparing. Fresh rosemary sat in small glass jars across the dining table. The good plates were already polished and waiting beside folded cloth napkins. A pumpkin-scented candle burned softly near the window. And in the kitchen, Thomas's favorite jazz station played quietly while I cooked. Turkey in the oven, sweet potatoes cooling on the counter, homemade cornbread, green bean casserole, mashed potatoes whipped with butter and cream the way Thomas loved them, and the beef stew. That stew had been our family recipe for almost 30 years. Thomas used to ask for it every winter. "Make the stew, Nick," he'd say. That stuff could heal broken bones. I smiled, thinking about him while stirring the pot that morning. For the first time in weeks, I actually felt hopeful. Maybe Thanksgiving would be different. Maybe Vanessa would be relaxed. Maybe everyone could simply enjoy being together again. I should have known better. Around 3 o'clock, Rachel arrived first carrying pies from the bakery near her school. "You've been cooking since sunrise again, haven't you?" she asked, kissing my cheek. I laughed softly. You know me. Jason came 30 minutes later with his boys crashing through the front door like tiny hurricanes. The house immediately felt alive. Football played in the living room. The grandkids chased each other down the hallway. Jason stole pieces of turkey from the kitchen when he thought I wasn't looking. For a while, it felt almost perfect. Then Vanessa arrived, and somehow the entire atmosphere shifted before she even spoke. You know how some people walk into a room carrying tension with them? That was Vanessa now. She stepped inside wearing a cream-colored designer coat that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment back when Thomas was alive. Ethan followed behind her carrying expensive wine bottles, and behind them came another couple. Vanessa's friends from Chicago. Mom, Vanessa said quickly while air-kissing my cheek. This is Claire and Benjamin. The woman smiled politely. The man shook my hand warmly. Your home is beautiful, Claire said kindly. Before I could respond, Vanessa laughed. It's very vintage Ohio. I smiled weakly. Rachel looked down at the floor immediately. We all moved into the dining room about an hour later. The table looked gorgeous. Candles glowing softly. Steam rising from serving dishes. The grandkids laughing. For one tiny second, I looked around the room and imagined Thomas sitting at the head of the table again. Then Vanessa opened her mouth. Oh, wow, she said while staring at the food. Mom really made enough food to feed an army. Jason shrugged. That's Thanksgiving. Vanessa poked the mashed potatoes with her spoon. Do you know how much butter is probably in these? Rachel sighed quietly under her breath. I forced a smile. It's one day a year. Ethan chuckled. Nicole believes calories don't count during holidays. Everyone gave polite little laughs. I laughed too, because I always laughed. Dinner continued. At first, the conversation stayed manageable. Claire complimented the turkey. Benjamin asked Jason about football. The children talked over each other excitedly, but Vanessa kept making comments about the salt, about the portions, about Midwestern eating habits. Then she started criticizing the kitchen itself. Mom, you seriously still have these cabinets? I looked up from serving gravy. What's wrong with them? They're ancient. Rachel finally snapped a little. They're cabinets, Vanessa. They hold dishes. I think they're doing their job. Vanessa rolled her eyes dramatically. Oh my God, relax. I'm just saying Mom deserves an upgrade. The room quieted again. That happened a lot around Vanessa lately. Conversations dying after her comments. Like everyone was constantly bracing themselves. Still, I kept serving food, kept smiling, kept trying. Then Benjamin took a bite of the beef stew. His eyes widened immediately. Okay, he said, pointing his spoon toward me. This is incredible. For the first time all evening, I genuinely smiled. Thank you. Claire nodded quickly. Seriously, this tastes amazing. And then Vanessa laughed. Not a soft laugh, a sharp one. Oh, trust me, everything tastes amazing. That's the problem. Jason immediately frowned. Vanessa. But she kept going. No, I'm serious. Mom cooks like every meal is trying to clog your arteries personally. Ethan smirked into his wine glass. Rachel stared at her plate. I felt my stomach tighten. Benjamin awkwardly tried to recover the moment. Well, honestly, my grandmother cooked like this too. Vanessa waved her hand dismissively. Exactly. Different generation. Then she lifted her spoon again and said the sentence that changed everything. That explains why Dad had cholesterol problems. Silence. Complete silence. Even the grandchildren stopped talking. I think my brain stopped functioning for a second. Because Thomas didn't die from cholesterol problems. He died in a car accident coming home from work. Vanessa knew that. Everyone at that table knew that. Rachel looked horrified. Vanessa, she whispered. Jason slammed his fork down. What the hell is wrong with you? Vanessa blinked like she genuinely didn't understand the reaction. Oh my God, I didn't mean it literally. You brought Dad into this over beef stew. Jason snapped. Vanessa crossed her arms immediately. Why is everyone so sensitive? I was standing beside the table holding the gravy boat when I suddenly realized my hands were shaking. Not slightly, violently. I set the gravy down before I dropped it. Claire looked deeply uncomfortable now. Benjamin stared at the table. Ethan finally spoke. I think people are overreacting. Rachel stood up so fast, her chair scraped loudly against the floor. No, she said, voice trembling. You two humiliate Mom every time you come here. Vanessa laughed in disbelief. Humiliate her? Are you serious? I couldn't speak. That was the strangest part. It felt like all the hurt from the past few years had finally piled too high inside my chest. And suddenly, I couldn't force another smile. Couldn't smooth things over. Couldn't pretend anymore. Because this time she hadn't just insulted my cooking. She insulted the memory of the man I loved most. Jason looked furious enough to explode. Rachel was close to tears. The grandchildren sat frozen in confusion. And Vanessa still looked annoyed instead of ashamed. That was the moment something inside me changed. Quietly. Permanently. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I simply untied my apron slowly and placed it on the kitchen counter. Then I looked directly at my daughter, and for the first time in years, I stopped making excuses for her. After everyone left that Thanksgiving night, I stood alone in my kitchen, staring at the untouched leftovers. The house was finally quiet. Too quiet. Dirty plates sat stacked beside the sink. Half-empty wine glasses remained scattered across the dining table. One of the grandkids had forgotten a tiny toy truck beneath a chair. Usually after family dinners, even exhausting ones, I felt full inside somehow. Tired, but full. That night, I felt hollow. I moved slowly through the kitchen, wrapping leftovers in aluminum foil with shaky hands. Turkey, cornbread, sweet potatoes, beef stew. Thomas's favorite stew. The same stew Vanessa had used to make jokes about her father. I stopped suddenly with the lid in my hand. For the first time all evening, I let myself cry. Not graceful crying. Not silent tears rolling softly down my cheeks like in movies. I mean the kind of crying that bends your body forward because the pain finally becomes too heavy to hold upright. I pressed one hand against the counter and cried into the empty kitchen where I had spent most of my adult life feeding people I loved, or thought I loved. At some point, I heard footsteps behind me. Rachel. I hadn't even realized she stayed. Oh, Mom. Her voice cracked immediately. I wiped my face quickly. I'm okay. No, you're not. She walked over and wrapped her arms around me the same way I used to hold her after nightmares when she was little. And suddenly, I realized something terrifying. My children had spent years watching me shrink inside my own home. Rachel pulled back and looked furious now. I can't believe she said that about Dad. I stared down at the container of beef stew. She didn't mean it. Rachel's face changed instantly. Not anger anymore. Disbelief. Mom, she whispered, why do you always protect her? I didn't answer because I honestly didn't know anymore. Maybe mothers are built to protect their children, even when those children become the ones hurting them. Jason came back inside a few minutes later, after loading leftovers into his truck. His jaw was still tight with anger. If she talks to you like that again, I'm done, he said flatly. Jason. No, he interrupted. I'm serious. He pulled a hand through his hair and paced near the table. She acts like she's ashamed of this family. Rachel nodded quietly. Jason looked at me again. And Ethan's worse. I sighed heavily. He just follows her lead. No, Jason replied immediately. He encourages it. Deep down, I knew he was right. Ethan never stopped Vanessa. Never softened her comments. If anything, he seemed entertained by them. Like watching Vanessa criticize her own family somehow proved they were above us now. Jason leaned against the counter. You know what Dad would have done tonight? That question hit me hard. Because yes, I knew exactly what Thomas would have done. Thomas never tolerated cruelty, especially not toward family. He believed disagreements were normal, but humiliation was something different. Humiliation damaged trust, and once trust breaks inside a family, everything else eventually follows. I looked around the kitchen slowly. The old cabinets Vanessa hated, the faded wallpaper, the scratches on the dining table from decades of family meals. Thomas built that table himself in our garage during the summer of 1994. Jason carved his initials underneath it when he was 11. Rachel spilled red paint on one corner during an elementary school art project. Vanessa once sat at that same table crying over algebra homework, while Thomas helped her study until midnight. Every mark in this room held memories, but Vanessa only saw something outdated, cheap, embarrassing. Rachel quietly helped me finish cleaning while Jason took the trash outside. Nobody mentioned Vanessa again for a while. Then my phone buzzed on the counter. A text message from Vanessa. I stared at the screen for several seconds before opening it. Mom, you guys seriously overreacted tonight. I felt something cold settle inside my chest. No apology, not even acknowledgement, just irritation. Another message appeared seconds later. Honestly, I was trying to help. You still cook like it's the 1980s. People care about health now. Then another. And if I'm being honest, the whole small-town comfort food thing can feel embarrassing around successful people. I read that sentence 3 times, embarrassing around successful people. Rachel saw my face immediately. What did she say? I handed her the phone silently. The moment Rachel finished reading, her expression hardened. Oh my God. Jason came back inside just in time to hear her. What now? Rachel passed him the phone. He stared at it for a long moment before laughing bitterly. There it is. I frowned. What, she's ashamed of us, he said quietly. The truth hurt because it sounded undeniable now. I sat down slowly at the kitchen table. The same table where I'd fed Vanessa thousands of meals over the course of her life. Soup when she had the flu. Pancakes shaped like hearts when she was little. Birthday cakes, graduation dinners, late-night grilled cheese sandwiches after heartbreaks. Every important moment of her life had passed through this kitchen. And somehow, she still looked at it with shame instead of love. Jason sat beside me. You don't deserve this, Mom. I stared at Thomas's empty chair. For years after he died, I kept expecting grief to become smaller. But grief doesn't shrink. Life simply grows around it. And suddenly, sitting there in that kitchen, I realized something painful. Vanessa's cruelty hurt so deeply because it felt like losing another piece of Thomas too. Those dinners weren't just meals, they were memories, traditions, the final living connection to the life we built together. And every joke Vanessa made chipped away at that connection. I thought about all the Sundays I spent anxious before she arrived, changing recipes to impress her, buying ingredients she approved of, trying desperately not to embarrass my own daughter. How many years had I spent earning affection that should have been freely given? Rachel sat across from me quietly. Then softly, she asked Mom, "Are you still inviting her for Christmas dinner?" The room went silent, because for the first time, the answer wasn't automatic. Normally, I would have said yes immediately. Of course, yes. She's my daughter. But this time, I pictured Vanessa laughing while insulting Thomas's memory. I pictured the grandkids sitting there confused and uncomfortable every Sunday. I pictured myself crying over containers of leftovers after spending days cooking for people who mocked me. And something inside me finally became tired. Not angry, not dramatic, just tired. I looked down at the family calendar hanging beside the refrigerator. Every Sunday dinner carefully written in blue ink. Every holiday planned weeks ahead. Then I quietly reached for a pen. Rachel watched silently. Jason stopped moving, and without saying a word, I crossed Vanessa's name off the guest list for next Sunday dinner. The sound of the pen scratching paper felt strangely loud. Final. I stared at the line through my daughter's name for several seconds. My chest hurt, but underneath the pain, there was relief too. Small, unfamiliar, but real. And for the first time in years, I realized protecting family should never require destroying yourself. The first Sunday dinner without Vanessa felt wrong from the moment I woke up. Not peaceful, not victorious, just unfamiliar. For nearly 40 years, Sunday mornings followed the same rhythm in my house. Coffee before church, grocery bags unpacked across the kitchen counter, music playing softly while I cooked, one extra chair mentally reserved for whichever child arrived last. And somewhere inside every recipe, there was always the expectation of Vanessa's criticism waiting for me by 4 o'clock. That morning, I kept catching myself bracing for it automatically. I reached for butter and hesitated. Then I stopped. No one was here to judge me. The realization felt strangely freeing. I stood alone in my kitchen, staring at the stick of butter in my hand, before slowly laughing to myself. A quiet laugh, the kind that escapes when you suddenly notice how exhausted you've been. So, I cooked exactly the way I used to when Thomas was alive. No adjustments, no apologizing, no trying to impress anyone. I seasoned the roast generously. I used cream in the mashed potatoes. I baked cornbread in Thomas's old cast-iron skillet, even though Vanessa once called it rural. And for the first time in years, cooking didn't feel stressful. It felt comforting again. Around 2 in the afternoon, Rachel arrived carrying fresh flowers. She stepped into the kitchen and immediately stopped. "Oh my God," she whispered dramatically, inhaling deeply. "It smells like childhood in here." I laughed softly. That good, that dangerous. She walked over and peeked into the pot roast. "You used the real recipe again." I did. Rachel smiled at me carefully, and in that moment, I realized something painful. My other children had noticed every compromise I'd been making too. Jason showed up an hour later with the boys. The second my grandsons smelled the kitchen, they started cheering. "Grandma made the good potatoes, I knew it." Jason laughed while taking off his coat. "See, this is why your house wins every holiday?" I smiled despite myself. Dinner that evening felt lighter. That's the only way I can describe it. Nobody criticized the food. Nobody mocked the house. Nobody made sarcastic comments disguised as jokes. The grandkids laughed loudly without tension hanging over the table. Rachel told funny stories about her students. Jason argued with the boys about football teams, and several times throughout dinner, I caught myself waiting for anxiety that never arrived. No sharp voice cutting through the warmth. No embarrassment. No humiliation. Just family. At one point, Rachel looked around the table quietly and said, "This feels different tonight." Jason nodded immediately. "Yeah." Nobody said Vanessa's name, but we were all thinking it. After dessert, Rachel asked if she could take a photo with everyone for Facebook. The boys made ridiculous faces. Jason pretended to hate pictures. I stood in the middle, holding a plate of peach cobbler, while Rachel snapped several photos near the dining table. One of them captured me laughing genuinely. Not forced, not polite, real laughter. I hadn't realized how long it had been since someone photographed me looking happy. Around 8:30, the house became quiet again after everyone left. I cleaned slowly, humming to myself. And for the first Sunday in years, I didn't cry afterward. I didn't replay cruel comments in my head. I didn't wonder what I should have cooked differently. I simply felt peaceful. That peace lasted exactly 43 minutes. At 9:17 p.m., my phone rang. Vanessa. I stared at the screen. Part of me considered ignoring it, but I answered anyway. Hello. Her voice came sharp and cold immediately. You had dinner tonight? I blinked. Yes, and you didn't invite me. There it was. No concern, no reflection, just outrage. I leaned against the kitchen counter. We have dinner every Sunday. That's not what I asked Mom. I closed my eyes briefly. In the background, I could hear city noise through her phone. Car horns, sirens somewhere far away. I saw Rachel's Facebook post, Vanessa continued. You all had family dinner without me. Her tone made it sound like a betrayal. I looked around my quiet kitchen, the same kitchen she insulted for years. Something inside me stayed unusually calm. Yes, I answered softly. A long silence followed. Then she laughed once in disbelief. Wow. I said nothing. So this is what we're doing now. What do you mean? You're punishing me because of Thanksgiving. Punishing? Interesting word. As if I were cruel for finally stepping away from pain. I took a slow breath. Vanessa, nobody punished you. Yes, you did. You intentionally excluded me. My chest tightened slightly, but my voice remained steady. You seemed unhappy at dinner for a long time. That's ridiculous. Is it another silence? I don't think Vanessa expected resistance from me. Certainly not calm resistance. Usually during conflict, I apologized quickly just to restore peace. But something had changed after Thanksgiving. Maybe pain eventually burns fear out of people. Vanessa scoffed. So Rachel and Jason are turning you against me now? No. Then what is this? I looked down at the dish towel in my hands. Then quietly, honestly, I said the sentence I'd been holding inside for years. I thought maybe you'd be happier not eating food you hate. Silence. Complete silence. I could practically hear her trying to process what I'd just said. Then her voice hardened instantly. Oh my God. You criticize every meal, Vanessa. I joke. No, I replied gently. You humiliate me. The words shocked even me once they were spoken aloud, because it was the first time I'd admitted the truth without softening it. Vanessa immediately became defensive. You're being dramatic. I don't think I am. You seriously excluded your own daughter over mashed potatoes? The irony almost made me laugh. Mashed potatoes, as if that had ever been the real issue. It wasn't about potatoes. Then what was it about? I finally answered honestly. It was about respect. Another long pause. And then for the first time in years, I heard uncertainty in Vanessa's voice. You're seriously mad about one comment. I stared at Thomas's empty chair across the room. No, I whispered. I'm tired of years of them. Vanessa exhaled sharply. You know what, fine. If everyone wants to act sensitive, whatever. Sensitive again. Always that word, like basic kindness had become weakness somehow. Then she added coldly. Honestly, Ethan said this would happen eventually. That caught my attention immediately. What does that mean, nothing? No, Vanessa. What does that mean? She hesitated. Then she sighed dramatically. He said, "You've always guilted people with this family dinner stuff." The sentence hit me harder than I expected, because suddenly everything made sense. Ethan never saw family dinners as love. He saw them as obligation, manipulation, something old-fashioned and emotionally inconvenient. And little by little, Vanessa had started seeing them that way too. I suddenly felt very tired. "I see." Vanessa's voice softened slightly for the first time. "So that's it. You're just cutting me out now?" That question broke my heart a little, because despite everything, she still sounded like my little girl for a second. But then I remembered Thanksgiving, Thomas's memory, the years of humiliation, the anxiety before every Sunday dinner. And finally, I answered truthfully. "No, Vanessa, I'm just done begging my own daughter to be kind to me." She didn't respond. Neither did I. The silence between us felt enormous. Then quietly, without another word, Vanessa hung up. And standing there alone in my kitchen, I realized something frightening. For the first time in my life, I no longer felt guilty. Vanessa didn't call me again for 4 days. That was unusual. Normally, after an argument, she either doubled down immediately or pretended nothing happened at all. Silence wasn't her style. So by Thursday afternoon, I knew something was coming. I was standing in my kitchen peeling apples for pie when my phone buzzed again. Vanessa. This time, I answered carefully. "Hi." Her voice was calm. Too calm. "I've been thinking." That sentence alone made me nervous. Vanessa only sounded controlled when she was angry enough to become cold. "I think we need to talk about what happened." I set the apple peeler down slowly. "Okay, I think you're letting Jason and Rachel manipulate you." I closed my eyes briefly. There it was. Not accountability. Not reflection. Just blame. "They're not manipulating me. They've always resented me," Vanessa continued. "Especially Rachel." I almost laughed at how backwards that was. Rachel adored Vanessa growing up. Followed her everywhere. Borrowed her sweaters. Defended her constantly. But success has a strange way of rewriting people's memories. "No one resents you," I said quietly. "Then why am I suddenly being treated like the villain?" I looked out the kitchen window toward the backyard, where Thomas used to grill burgers every summer. "You really don't understand." Vanessa sighed dramatically. "Mom, people joke with each other. That's normal." "No," I replied softly. "Cruelty becomes normal when people stop challenging it." Silence. Then came the sharper tone. "So now I'm cruel." The old version of me would have backtracked immediately, would have softened the truth to avoid conflict. But something inside me had shifted permanently now. I no longer wanted peace built on pretending I wasn't hurting. "I think you've been hurting me for a long time," I answered honestly. The line went completely quiet, and for a second, I imagined Vanessa standing in her expensive Chicago apartment, holding her phone, with that familiar expression of disbelief she always wore whenever someone challenged her. Finally, she spoke again. "You're seriously doing this? What does that mean?" "You're acting like I abused you because I made comments about food." Again, food, as if the meals themselves were ever the point. I leaned against the counter. "Vanessa, it was never about the food. Then explain it to me." So I did. For the first time in years, I stopped protecting her from the truth. "You mock everything about this house." Silence. "You mock the dinners." Nothing. "You mock the way I cook." A sharp exhale. "You mock where we come from." Now her breathing sounded irritated, and on Thanksgiving I continued carefully. "You insulted your father's memory." Immediately Vanessa snapped. Oh my God, I did not insult Dad. You joked about him dying because of my cooking. I was kidding. You humiliated me in front of strangers. That's ridiculous. No, I said quietly. It's true. Another long silence stretched between us. Then Vanessa's voice hardened completely. You know what I think? I think you like playing the victim. That sentence landed harder than all the others. Because suddenly, I understood something painful. Vanessa genuinely believed she was the reasonable one. I swallowed slowly. You think setting boundaries makes me a victim? I think excluding your own daughter from family dinners is manipulative. I stared at the countertop while anger slowly rose inside my chest. Not explosive anger. The calm kind. The dangerous kind that grows after years of swallowing hurt quietly. For years, I said softly, I spent every Sunday anxious in my own kitchen because I was afraid of what you'd criticize next. Vanessa didn't answer. I changed recipes because of you. Still silence. I stopped cooking things your father loved because you made me ashamed of them. Now I heard something unfamiliar on the line. Not anger, discomfort. But it vanished quickly. You're exaggerating. No, I whispered. I'm finally being honest. That seemed to make her furious. Fine, Vanessa snapped. If you want honesty, here's honesty. You take everything personally because you refuse to adapt. I frowned. What does that mean? It means the world changes, Mom. People change. You can't expect everyone to pretend small-town traditions are the center of the universe forever. There it was again. The shame, the embarrassment. Like family traditions were somehow signs of failure. I suddenly remembered something Thomas once said after Vanessa moved to Chicago for work. She's running from something. At the time, I asked what he meant. Thomas shrugged sadly. Herself, maybe. Back then, I didn't understand. Now I did. Vanessa wasn't just rejecting my cooking. She was rejecting every part of her past that reminded her she didn't grow up wealthy. And I represented that past more than anyone else. You know what hurts the most? I asked quietly. Vanessa sighed impatiently. What, you act embarrassed that I was your mother? That sentence finally silenced her. Completely. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she answered in a much quieter voice. That's not fair. Isn't it, no? Then why do you treat everything about this family like it's beneath you? I don't. You do. She immediately became defensive again. You have no idea how hard I worked to build the life I have. I know you worked hard. No, you don't, she snapped. You have no clue what people are like in my world. And suddenly, for the first time, I heard something underneath Vanessa's arrogance. Fear. Real fear. Fear of not fitting in. Fear of being judged. Fear of people discovering she came from an ordinary middle-class family in Ohio instead of whatever polished fantasy she'd built around herself. But instead of dealing with that fear honestly, she turned it into superiority. I sat down slowly at the kitchen table. You know something your father used to say? Vanessa didn't answer. He used to say people who are truly comfortable with themselves don't need to constantly prove they're better than others. The silence afterward felt heavy. Then Vanessa laughed bitterly. Wow. So now Dad would be disappointed in me too. I immediately regretted saying it. Vanessa. No, it's fine. Her voice sounded colder now, sharper. I get it. Jason and Rachel are the good children. I'm the terrible one. That's not true. Really? Because lately it feels pretty true. I rubbed my forehead tiredly. This isn't about choosing sides. Then invite me Sunday. The demand came suddenly, directly, like a test. I froze. Part of me immediately wanted to say yes. Because that's what mothers do. We restore comfort. We fix tension. We open doors again, even when we're still bleeding from the last time someone walked through them carelessly. But then I remembered Thanksgiving, the humiliation, the anxiety, the relief I felt during the first peaceful dinner without her. And most importantly, I realized Vanessa still hadn't apologized. Not once. Not genuinely. Instead, she kept explaining why her behavior should be tolerated. That wasn't remorse. That was entitlement. I took a slow breath. No. The word shocked both of us. What no? I repeated gently. Not this Sunday. Vanessa went completely silent. Then finally she whispered, "You're serious?" "Yes." Over comments about food. I closed my eyes. No, Vanessa. Over years of disrespect. And for the first time since she was a child, I let my daughter sit with the consequences of her own behavior instead of rescuing her from them. She hung up without saying goodbye. I sat there afterward staring at the quiet kitchen around me. My heart hurt. Of course it hurt. Nothing about this felt easy. But underneath the grief, there was something else growing too. Self-respect. And once a person finally remembers they deserve kindness, it becomes very hard to return to pretending cruelty is acceptable love. About 2 weeks after I stopped inviting Vanessa to Sunday dinners, Rachel called me on a Wednesday evening, sounding nervous. "Mom," she said carefully. Vanessa invited everyone to dinner Saturday. I paused while folding laundry. Everyone. Yeah, she said she wants to host a proper family evening. Something about Rachel's tone made me stop folding altogether. "What's wrong?" Rachel hesitated. I think she's trying to prove something. Deep down, I already knew she was right. Vanessa didn't do anything casually anymore. Everything had become performance, presentation, image. Still, I agreed to go. Not because I particularly wanted to spend an evening pretending things were normal, but because part of me still hoped. That dangerous little hopeful part of mothers never fully dies. Saturday evening, I drove to Chicago for the first time in almost a year. Vanessa and Ethan lived in one of those luxury high-rise buildings downtown, where everything smells faintly expensive. The lobby had marble floors, gold lighting, and a doorman who looked at my old winter coat a second too long before smiling politely. I suddenly became aware of every ordinary thing about myself. My sensible shoes, my department store purse, the tiny wrinkle near my collar that wouldn't smooth out. Vanessa used to make me feel that way constantly lately, like I needed upgrading. Rachel and Jason arrived around the same time I did. Jason gave me a quick look that silently asked if I was okay. I nodded, barely. When the elevator doors opened into Vanessa's condo, the first thing I noticed was how beautiful everything looked. The second thing I noticed was how cold it felt. The apartment belonged in a magazine. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city skyline, glowing against the dark evening sky. White marble countertops stretched across an enormous kitchen nobody actually cooked in. Soft jazz played quietly through hidden speakers. Everything matched perfectly. Everything looked untouched. A woman in a black uniform greeted us carrying trays of appetizers. I blinked. Vanessa walked over, smiling brightly. "Oh, good, you made it." I stared at the woman. "You hired help." Vanessa laughed lightly. "It's easier this way. Easier." I looked around the spotless kitchen. No smell of food cooking, no warmth, no chaos, no memories, just presentation. Ethan appeared beside Vanessa holding wine glasses. "Nicole," he said smoothly, "welcome to civilization." Jason immediately muttered, "Jesus Christ," under his breath. Vanessa shot him a warning look. "What?" "It was a joke," Ethan replied casually. Rachel looked uncomfortable already. We moved into the dining area, where an elegant table had been set with tiny portions of food arranged like artwork. I didn't even know what half the dishes were. There were edible flowers on one plate, foam on another. Tiny circles of sauce painted across white porcelain. One of my grandsons whispered loudly to Jason. "Where's the real food?" I almost laughed despite myself. Vanessa overheard. "This is modern dining," she explained proudly. The boys looked devastated. Dinner began awkwardly. The hired chef came out occasionally describing each course with words like deconstructed and infused. Jason leaned toward me quietly during one plate involving a single scallop. "I'm stopping for burgers on the way home." I nearly choked, trying not to laugh. For the first 20 minutes, Vanessa seemed almost triumphant, like she'd finally built the kind of dinner she considered superior to mine. Everything looked expensive. Everything sounded sophisticated. Everything felt emotionally empty. Nobody relaxed. Nobody reached across the table for seconds. Nobody interrupted each other laughing. The children barely touched their food. Even Rachel looked tense, trying not to say anything critical. At one point, Vanessa lifted her wineglass proudly. "See, this is what dinner can feel like without all the heavy comfort food." Jason stared at her. "What exactly is wrong with comfort?" Vanessa sighed dramatically. "Nothing. I'm just saying people can evolve." There was that word again. Evolve. As if kindness, warmth, and tradition were primitive flaws. Ethan smirked slightly. "I think Nicole took the whole food thing too personally." Rachel immediately set her fork down. She insulted Mom for years. "Oh, please," Vanessa replied. I made comments. "You humiliated her," Rachel snapped. Vanessa leaned back in her chair. "I think everybody's addicted to being offended lately." The table fell quiet instantly. I looked down at the tiny decorative portion on my plate and suddenly realized something strange. For the first time in years, I wasn't intimidated by Vanessa anymore. I just felt sad for her. Because despite all the money surrounding us, this dinner lacked the one thing people actually remember: love. Then one of the boys whispered again, much too loudly. "Grandma's mashed potatoes are better." Jason burst out laughing. Even Rachel smiled. Vanessa's face tightened immediately. "Can we not compare everything to Mom's dinners?" Jason shrugged. "You brought it up." "No, I invited everyone here to move forward." Rachel frowned. "By proving your dinners are classier?" Vanessa scoffed. "Oh my God, why does everyone assume the worst about me? Because you give us reasons to?" I thought silently. But I said nothing. Then Ethan casually added, "Honestly, I think people romanticize struggle too much. There's nothing noble about staying stuck in small-town habits forever." That did it. Jason leaned back slowly. "You know what your problem is?" Vanessa immediately snapped Jason. "No," he interrupted firmly. "Both of you think money automatically makes people better. That's not what we said. It's exactly what you imply constantly." Vanessa looked exhausted now. "Can we please not turn this into therapy?" Rachel folded her arms. "You invited us." "Yes, because Mom decided to exile me over mashed potatoes." I finally spoke. Quietly. It was never about mashed potatoes. The room went silent again. Vanessa looked at me immediately. "Then tell me what it's about." I held her gaze for several seconds. "It's about making people feel small." Something shifted in Vanessa's expression then. Not guilt exactly. More like discomfort. Because somewhere deep down, she knew. She knew those dinners at my house were never truly about food. They were about belonging. And here, in this perfect apartment, surrounded by expensive plates and skyline views, nobody belonged to each other at all. Dinner ended earlier than expected. No one lingered afterward. At my house, people stayed for hours after eating, talking, laughing, packing leftovers. Tonight, everyone looked relieved to leave. Rachel hugged me near the elevator. You okay? I nodded softly. Actually, yes. And strangely, I meant it. Because for the first time, I saw Vanessa clearly. Not as the powerful daughter whose approval I desperately needed, but as a deeply insecure woman exhausting herself trying to outrun her own past. As Jason and I waited for the elevator, he glanced back toward Vanessa's apartment. You noticed something? What nobody looked happy in there. I thought about the spotless kitchen, the catered food, the forced sophistication, the silence between people. Then I remembered my crowded little dining room back home, filled with laughter, second helpings, and children stealing cornbread before dinner. And suddenly, I understood something important. Vanessa had spent years mocking my meals because she confused elegance with warmth. But warmth cannot be purchased. It has to be built. Slowly, patiently, through years of showing people they are loved. And deep down, I think Vanessa finally realized that her beautiful life felt strangely empty compared to a small kitchen in Ohio filled with food she claimed to hate. 3 days after Vanessa's dinner party in Chicago, I was standing in my grocery store comparing canned tomatoes when I heard someone call my name from the end of the aisle. Nicole Black. I looked up in surprise. Margaret Lewis stood there smiling at me with the exact same bright red lipstick she'd worn since 1987. I hadn't seen Margaret in almost 6 years. She looked older, of course. We both did. But her energy hadn't changed at all. She still carried herself like someone permanently late to something exciting. Oh my goodness, I laughed softly. Margaret! She hugged me immediately. What happened to you? She demanded dramatically. You disappeared from civilization. I live 20 minutes away. That's basically wilderness now. I laughed harder than I expected to. Margaret had that effect on people. Back in our 30s, we worked together at Parker's family restaurant downtown. Margaret handled front-of-house management while I cooked in the kitchen. Those were some of the hardest years of my life. And somehow, some of the happiest, too. Before children got older, before grief, before family dinners started feeling painful instead of comforting. Margaret grabbed my shopping cart and immediately started talking. I heard about Thomas years ago, she said softly. I'm sorry I wasn't there. The mention of his name still pinched something inside me. Thank you. And your kids? I hesitated just slightly. They're complicated. Margaret snorted knowingly. Aren't they all? We ended up standing in that grocery aisle nearly 40 minutes talking. About aging. About retirement. About how strange it feels waking up one day and realizing your children are middle-aged adults with opinions you no longer recognize. Then Margaret suddenly asked, You still cooking? I shrugged. For family dinners, that's not what I mean. I looked at her carefully. Margaret crossed her arms. You are the best cook Parker's ever had. I laughed immediately. That's generous? No, it's factual. Her tone became serious. People used to line up for your beef stew during winter. That surprised me, because honestly, I hadn't thought about Parker's restaurant in years. Not really. Back then, Thomas and I barely survived financially. I worked double shifts in the kitchen while he worked overtime at the factory. Sometimes we passed each other in the hallway, too exhausted to finish conversations. But those years mattered. Parker's restaurant wasn't fancy. It had squeaky booths, chipped mugs, and old coffee refills that never seemed to end. But people loved that place, especially the food. My food. I still remember the winter of 1998, when a snowstorm shut half the town down for 3 days. Parker's stayed open because people needed hot meals, and I practically lived in that kitchen making soup, stew, and biscuits nonstop. Margaret smiled at the memory. Do you remember old Mr. Callahan, the retired mailman? Yes, he used to come in every Tuesday just for your chicken and dumplings. I laughed softly. He flirted with every waitress over 60. Margaret pointed at me dramatically. He flirted with you specifically. For a moment, standing there between canned vegetables and pasta sauce, I felt younger again, lighter. Then Margaret asked casually, "Why'd you stop?" I frowned. Stop what, cooking professionally? That question caught me off guard, because the answer felt so obvious to me I'd never really examined it before. Kids, I said simply. Life. Margaret tilted her head. You gave up a lot, Nicole. I immediately shook my head. No, I chose my family. That's not the same thing. Her words stayed with me longer than I expected. After we checked out, Margaret stopped me in the parking lot. Oh, before I forget. She dug through her purse quickly and handed me a colorful flyer. Dayton Winter Food Festival. Local Legends. Cook-Off. I stared at it blankly. Margaret grinned. I'm helping organize it this year. That's nice. I want you in it. I laughed immediately. Oh no. Yes. Margaret, I haven't cooked professionally in decades, so I'm 67 years old, and I shook my head firmly. I'm not doing a food competition. It's not really a competition, she argued. It's a community event. Still no. Margaret narrowed her eyes. Why are you acting scared? That irritated me slightly. I'm not scared. Then do it. I opened my mouth to argue, then stopped. Because suddenly I realized something uncomfortable. Maybe I was scared. Not of cooking, of judgment, of criticism, of failing publicly. And underneath all of that, Vanessa's voice echoed quietly in my head. Outdated, unhealthy, embarrassing, small-town food. Margaret watched my expression carefully. Then her face softened. Oh, honey, she said quietly. Who made you doubt yourself like this? The question hit me so hard, I almost looked away. Because until that moment, I hadn't realized how deeply Vanessa's comments had rooted themselves inside me. I used to cook fearlessly, confidently, joyfully. Now I second-guessed everything, even seasoning soup alone in my own kitchen. Margaret squeezed my arm gently. Nicole Black, she said firmly, you fed half this town for years. I laughed awkwardly. That's dramatic. No, she replied. That's true. Later that night, I sat alone at my kitchen table, staring at the festival flyer. The house smelled faintly like cinnamon because I'd baked muffins earlier that afternoon. Outside, snow drifted softly against the windows, and for some reason I kept thinking about who I used to be before I became so afraid of criticism. Back when Thomas sat at this table encouraging me constantly, "You could open your own restaurant someday," he used to say. I always laughed him off, but secretly I loved cooking, not just as a mother, as myself. There's a difference. That realization startled me, because somewhere over the years I stopped being Nicole. I became mom, wife, caretaker, cook for everyone else. And maybe I forgot there was talent underneath all that giving. My phone buzzed suddenly. A text from Jason. Dinner Sunday. I smiled softly. Then another message arrived seconds later. And Mom, your mashed potatoes are undefeated. I laughed out loud. Then Rachel texted too. Tell Mom she better make cornbread this week. For the first time in a very long while, my kitchen no longer felt like a place of anxiety. It felt alive again. Warm, wanted, and suddenly staring down at that festival flyer, I heard Thomas's voice clearly in my head. You're still good at this, Nick. Tears burned unexpectedly behind my eyes, because after years of being mocked, dismissed, and made to feel outdated, I realized something important. Maybe Vanessa had spent so long criticizing my cooking that I forgot other people once considered it extraordinary. And maybe, just maybe, I was finally ready to remember. The morning of the Dayton Winter Food Festival, I almost didn't go. At 67 years old, fear feels different than it did when you're young. It's quieter, more logical. It disguises itself as practicality. You tell yourself things like, "What's the point? You're too old. Nobody cares anymore." I stood in my bedroom holding 2 sweaters, trying to convince myself I wasn't nervous. Rachel arrived first to drive me downtown. The second she walked through the front door, she smiled knowingly. "You're panicking." "I am not. You changed outfits twice already." I frowned. "How would you know that?" "Because one sweater is still lying on the couch." I glanced toward the living room and sighed. Rachel laughed softly before walking over and squeezing my shoulders. "Mom, what you're going to be amazing." That sentence alone almost made me emotional, because encouragement had become unfamiliar lately. I didn't realize how starved I'd become for kindness until people started giving it back to me. Jason met us downtown with the boys, already hyped up from hot chocolate and too much sugar. The festival filled nearly 3 city blocks. Local vendors lined the streets selling chili-baked goods, smoked meats, coffee, and desserts. Christmas lights hung overhead despite it still being afternoon. Music drifted through the cold air while people bundled in heavy coats moved from booth to booth, laughing. It felt alive. Warm despite the freezing weather. Margaret spotted me immediately near the registration tent. "There she is." Before I could react, she grabbed both my hands dramatically. "Nicole Black returns to civilization." I rolled my eyes. "You really need new material." "No," Margaret replied proudly. "I know what works." She led me toward my booth while talking nonstop. "You're already getting attention. What does that mean people saw your name on the local lineup?" I laughed nervously. "Margaret, nobody remembers me." She stopped walking and looked directly at me. "Oh, honey," she said softly, "you have no idea." My booth sat near the center of the festival beside a bakery stand and across from a barbecue smoker. Simple sign: Nicole Black homemade beef stew and cornbread. That was it. No trendy branding, no fancy descriptions. Just food. My food. I spent the first 20 minutes nervously adjusting serving spoons and pretending not to notice people glancing over. Then the first customer arrived. An older man in a Detroit Lions hat stared at me for several seconds before his face lit up. "Wait a minute," he said slowly. "Parker's Restaurant." I blinked. "You remember Parker's, remember it?" He laughed loudly. "Lady, your beef stew got me through 2 divorces." I burst out laughing. Within minutes, he returned carrying 3 more people. Then another group arrived. Then another. Suddenly, people weren't just buying food. They were telling stories. "Oh my God, I used to eat your chicken and dumplings every Friday after work. You catered my cousin's wedding in 2001. My dad talked about your peach cobbler for years. One woman nearly cried after tasting the stew. This tastes exactly like my grandmother's cooking." That sentence hit me hard, because I finally understood something Vanessa never did. Food isn't only about ingredients. It's memory, comfort, connection. People weren't standing in line because my recipes were fashionable. They were standing there because my food made them feel loved. And once I realized that something inside me relaxed completely, I stopped doubting myself, stopped overthinking, stopped hearing Vanessa's criticism in my head. By mid-afternoon, our booth had one of the longest lines at the festival. Jason looked stunned. "Mom," he whispered, "you're kind of famous." I laughed. "Relax." "No, seriously," Rachel added. "People are literally taking pictures of your stew." One of my grandsons proudly shouted to strangers, "That's my grandma." Margaret passed by grinning like she'd personally won an Olympic medal. "I told you." I shook my head, laughing. "You're unbearable. And correct." Then something unexpected happened. A young woman holding a microphone approached the booth. Nicole Black. I looked up nervously. I'm Jenna Morris from Dayton Living magazine. Do you have a few minutes for a quick interview? I nearly dropped the ladle. Me. She smiled warmly. We've been hearing about your booth all afternoon. Rachel immediately whispered, Mom, do not say no. So 20 minutes later, I found myself standing beside giant steaming pots of beef stew while a reporter interviewed me in front of cameras and festival lights. Jenna smiled kindly. So what makes your recipes so special? I opened my mouth automatically to say something modest. Then I stopped. Because for years, I'd minimized myself, shrunk myself, apologized for taking up space. This time, I answered honestly. I cook for people the way I wanted my family to feel. Jenna tilted her head slightly. What does that mean? I looked around the festival. Families laughing together, children running through crowds, couples sharing food. It means, I said softly, food should make people feel safe, seen, welcome. Rachel immediately teared up behind the camera. Jason pretended not to notice. Jenna smiled warmly. That's beautiful. Then she asked one final question. What inspired you to start cooking? And without even thinking, I answered my husband, Thomas. Always Thomas. I explained how Sunday dinners became sacred in our family, how food held people together during hard times, how some recipes carried memories stronger than photographs. When the interview finished, strangers actually applauded softly nearby. I felt embarrassed and emotional all at once. But underneath everything else, I felt proud, truly proud. Not because people complimented my food, because for the first time in years, I stopped feeling ashamed of the things that made me who I am. Around 6 o'clock, Rachel suddenly froze while looking at her phone. Her expression changed immediately. What Jason asked. Rachel looked at me carefully. Vanessa saw the article. My stomach tightened slightly. What article? Rachel turned her phone around. Dayton Living magazine had already posted an online preview from the festival interview. There I was, standing behind my booth, smiling beside giant pots of stew. The headline read, The Woman Who Fed a Community with Love. My throat tightened unexpectedly. Because no one had described me kindly like that in a very long time. Jason glanced between me and Rachel. What did Vanessa say? Rachel hesitated, then quietly answered. She commented, Interesting people still celebrate unhealthy food like this. Jason immediately scoffed. You've got to be kidding me. But strangely, I didn't feel crushed this time. I looked around the crowded booth filled with strangers happily eating my food, people laughing, sharing stories, coming back for seconds. And suddenly, Vanessa's opinion felt smaller than it ever had before. Not unimportant. She was still my daughter, but no longer powerful enough to define my worth. Margaret appeared beside me again, carrying fresh cornbread trays. You okay? I smiled softly. Yeah, and for the first time in years. That answer was completely true. I should have known Vanessa would show up. Not physically, not yet. But Vanessa never stayed away from something that made her feel like she was being replaced. It started the next morning. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Rachel called first. Mom, have you checked Facebook? I was still in bed. No. Why? A long pause. Vanessa commented on the magazine post. My chest tightened slightly. I figured. Jason called seconds later. She's spiraling, he said bluntly. What do you mean she's arguing with people online? That made me sit up. What kind of arguing? Another pause. The kind where she tries to explain why your food is unhealthy and everyone is telling her to stop. I closed my eyes. This was not the version of Vanessa I was used to. My daughter used to be confident, controlled, carefully composed. But lately, every time she reacted to me, it felt less like confidence and more like panic. By noon, Margaret showed up at my house without warning, holding her phone like it was evidence in a crime scene. "You are officially viral," she announced. "I am, what?" She shoved the phone toward me. The article had exploded overnight. Comments, shares, local news reposts. People weren't just praising my cooking anymore. They were telling their own stories. I used to eat at Parker's every week. My grandmother learned from Nicole Black's recipes. This is what real food looks like. I stared at the screen in disbelief. This can't be real. "Oh, it's real," Margaret said. "And someone is very unhappy about it." I already knew who she meant. Vanessa. That afternoon, Jason came over early, pacing in my kitchen like he was trying not to explode. "She's posting again," he said. Rachel followed behind him, holding her phone tightly. "She's telling people the festival was nostalgic propaganda." I frowned. "What does that even mean?" Jason laughed bitterly. "It means she hates that people are happy without her approval." Rachel hesitated. "There's more." I looked at her. She mentioned Dad. That stopped me completely. "What did she say?" Rachel's voice softened. She said, "People are romanticizing your cooking because they're emotional about the past. And that Dad wouldn't approve of unhealthy food being called love." Silence fell in the kitchen. Even Jason stopped moving, because that was the first time Vanessa had used Thomas's memory publicly as a weapon. Not a joke, not a careless comment, a statement, intentional, calculated. I slowly sat down at the kitchen table. My hands felt cold. Rachel immediately sat beside me. "Mom, she's just trying to provoke you." But Jason shook his head. "No," he said quietly. "She's trying to rewrite everything." That sentence stayed in the air longer than anything else. Rewrite everything, because that was exactly what Vanessa had been doing for years, rewriting our past, rewriting our identity, rewriting what love looked like so she could feel superior to it. That evening, I finally saw the full post. Rachel showed me reluctantly. Vanessa had written a long caption under a screenshot of my magazine interview. She called it romanticized poverty cuisine. She said nostalgia should not be mistaken for quality. She implied people were emotionally manipulated by comfort food. And then she wrote, "My mother is a good cook, but her generation confuses survival food with cultural value." I read that sentence 3 times. Survival food. As if the meals I made for her childhood were something to survive instead of something that built her. Jason leaned against the counter. "She's not okay." Rachel nodded slowly. "No," she whispered. "She's embarrassed." I looked up. That word again? Embarrassed. For years I thought Vanessa was embarrassed of me. But standing there reading her words, I finally understood something deeper. Vanessa wasn't just embarrassed of me. She was embarrassed of where she came from, and I represented everything she was trying to escape. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about her. Not the angry version, not the mocking version, but the little girl who once stood on a stool beside me in this very kitchen stirring pancake batter. She used to call my food magic. What changed? At some point, success stopped making her feel proud and started making her feel ashamed of her past. And I had become the most visible reminder of that past. The next morning, Margaret called me again. Her voice was unusually serious. "Nicole, I think you need to see something." I went over immediately. She handed me her tablet. A new post. Vanessa had posted a photo of me from the festival. But this time she added a caption. "My mother has always been talented in traditional cooking. I just think it's important not to confuse nostalgia with progress." Below it, she added, I support her success, but I don't support misleading health narratives. Margaret snorted loudly. She's really doubling down. But I wasn't even angry anymore. I was tired. Deeply tired. Because I realized something important. Vanessa wasn't arguing with me. She was arguing with the world's reaction to me, and losing. That afternoon, something unexpected happened. Jason came over holding his phone, expression strange. "Mom, you need to see this." I looked at the screen. It was a comment thread under Vanessa's post. Thousands of replies. But one comment stood out. A man wrote, "I don't know what your issue is, but I lost my wife 2 years ago." Nicole Black's beef stew was the only thing that made me feel human again during that time. If that's survival food, then I hope I never stop surviving. Then another. My mother learned cooking from Nicole Black at Parker's. She fed our entire neighborhood during the recession. Then another. You don't get to redefine someone who fed half a town. Jason looked at me. She can't control the narrative anymore. I stared at the screen quietly. For the first time, I saw Vanessa not as powerful, but as outnumbered. Not by me, but by truth. That night, I finally went to bed without anxiety, but around midnight, my phone rang. Vanessa. I hesitated before answering. "Hello." Her voice was different this time, not sharp, not sarcastic. Tired. "Everyone is attacking me," she said immediately. I closed my eyes. "Vanessa, I didn't do anything wrong." I stayed silent. "They're twisting everything I said." Still silence. Then her voice cracked slightly. "Mom, I just don't understand why they're choosing you over me." That sentence hit me harder than anything else she had ever said. Not anger, not mockery, but confusion. Genuine confusion. Like she truly believed love was a competition she had lost. I took a slow breath. "This isn't about choosing sides." "Yes, it is," she whispered. "No," I said gently. "It's about how you made people feel." Silence. Longer this time. Then she asked quietly, "Do you hate me?" My chest tightened immediately. Because despite everything, despite the humiliation, despite the pain, despite the years of criticism, the answer was still no. But love doesn't mean accepting harm. So I answered honestly, "No, Vanessa." A shaky breath on the other end. "But I can't keep letting you hurt me." Silence again. Then she whispered something I barely recognized. "I didn't mean to hurt you." And for the first time in a long time, I heard something real in her voice. Fear. Not arrogance, not superiority. Fear of losing me completely. But healing doesn't happen all at once. It happens in moments. Small cracks in old patterns. I closed my eyes. "I know," I said softly. And for the first time in years, we didn't hang up in anger. We hung up in uncertainty. And somehow, that was the beginning of something neither of us understood yet. I didn't hear from Vanessa for 5 days after that phone call. No messages, no comments, no passive-aggressive posts, just silence. And somehow, that silence felt heavier than all her criticism combined. At first, I told myself it was peace, but deep down, I knew better. Vanessa didn't disappear when she lost control. She recalculated. On the 6th day, Jason came into my house without knocking. That alone told me something was wrong. "Mom," he said immediately, "you need to sit down." My stomach dropped. "What happened?" He held up his phone. "It's about Dad." My hands went cold. Jason turned the screen toward me. A scanned image. Old handwriting. Familiar handwriting. Thomas's. My breath caught instantly. "I don't understand," I whispered. Rachel arrived seconds later, already crying. "She posted it," she said. "Posted what?" Jason looked at me carefully. "A letter." I felt the room tilt slightly. What letter? Rachel hesitated. The one Dad wrote. Before he died. My knees weakened instantly, and I grabbed the edge of the kitchen counter. No, I said quietly. That's not possible. Jason nodded slowly. She got into the storage box in Chicago. Ethan had it. My heart started pounding harder. Because that box wasn't just old memories. It was private. It contained Thomas's personal letters, his notes, and something he had always told me was only for Vanessa when she was ready. I had never forced her to read it. I believed she would find it when she needed it. I never imagined she would take it like this. Rachel scrolled. Vanessa had posted it publicly with a caption, "My father once wrote this before his passing." I think people should understand the emotional manipulation behind family traditions. I froze. Jason swore under his breath. Then Rachel began reading aloud, softly. Not the whole letter, just the parts Vanessa highlighted. Thomas's words filled my kitchen like a ghost returning home. I hope you understand what your mother gave up for you. I hope you never mistake her love for weakness. She feeds this family because it is how she holds us together. My throat tightened painfully. But Vanessa had added comments under each line, interpretations, twisted meanings. She claimed the letter proved I had controlled the family through emotional dependency. Jason slammed his phone down on the table. She's lost it. Rachel shook her head. No, she whispered. She's desperate. I sat down slowly because my legs no longer supported me. Not because of anger, but because I suddenly understood the full extent of what Vanessa was doing. She wasn't just attacking me anymore. She was rewriting Thomas, turning love into manipulation, turning sacrifice into control, turning memory into weapon. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I sat in the kitchen staring at the same table Thomas built with his own hands. Every scratch on that wood felt like a memory being violated. By morning, the entire town knew. Margaret called me before I even finished my coffee. "Nicole," she said carefully, "I'm coming over." Her voice told me everything I needed to know. By noon, my house was full. Jason pacing, Rachel crying quietly in the corner, Margaret furious, and me, strangely numb. "I can't believe she did this," Margaret said, shaking her head. That letter was private grief, not a public argument. Jason looked exhausted. "She's not even listening anymore. She's just trying to win." Rachel looked at me. "Mom?" "What do we do?" I didn't answer immediately, because for the first time in my life, I didn't know. That evening, something unexpected happened. A call came from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something inside me told me to. "Hello?" A man's voice. Polite, careful, "Mrs. Black. This is Daniel Carter from the Dayton Food Festival Committee." I frowned. "Yes, there's something we need to discuss regarding your daughter's posts." My chest tightened slightly. "Is something wrong?" A pause. Not wrong, but complicated. 2 hours later, I was sitting in a small conference room downtown with Margaret beside me, Jason standing near the door, and Rachel gripping my hand. Daniel placed a printed stack of pages on the table. "Your daughter has been contacted by multiple organizations," he said gently. "She's claiming the festival misrepresented her family." I blinked. She didn't even attend the festival. Daniel nodded. "That's why this is difficult." He slid another document toward me. Legal letterhead. My stomach sank. "She's requesting that your interview be retracted." Silence. Jason laughed bitterly. "She's trying to erase her own mother now." But Daniel raised a hand. "There's more." He hesitated, She also submitted a claim that your recipes should not be labeled as authentic community heritage because she believes they promote unhealthy nostalgia. Margaret exploded immediately. That's ridiculous. But I wasn't listening anymore, because I finally understood. Vanessa wasn't just fighting me. She was trying to redefine reality itself. If she could convince people my food wasn't meaningful, then maybe she could convince herself her past didn't matter. That night, I went home alone. For the first time in weeks, the house felt unfamiliar again. I walked into the kitchen and opened the old drawer where I kept Thomas's handwritten recipe book. The pages were worn, stained, familiar. I flipped through slowly. Every recipe had a memory attached. Every note in his handwriting felt like a conversation I wasn't ready to lose. And suddenly, I made a decision. Not emotional, not reactive. Clear. I picked up my phone and called Margaret. I'm going to respond. She didn't ask what I meant. She already understood. The next morning, I went back to Parker's old restaurant building. It was closed now, repurposed into a small community hall. But the kitchen was still there. Margaret unlocked it for me. It hasn't been used in years, she said. I stepped inside slowly. The same stainless steel counters, the same stove, the same quiet hum of old memories. I stood there for a long time. Then I tied an apron around my waist. And for the first time in years, I cooked without fear. Not for Vanessa, not for approval, not for defense, for truth. By afternoon, Margaret posted something online, a short video, me in the kitchen, cooking Thomas's beef stew. No explanation, no argument. Just food, and my voice saying, "This is not nostalgia. This is love you can taste." Within hours, the video spread faster than anything Vanessa had posted. Comments flooded in again. But this time, they weren't debating. They were remembering. And somewhere in Chicago, Vanessa was watching. I didn't hear from Vanessa for 2 days after Margaret posted the video. But I could feel it coming. This time not like anger, not like pride, like pressure building behind a closed door. Jason noticed it too. "She's not done," he said quietly while helping me chop vegetables one morning. Rachel looked up from the table. "She can't keep escalating this, can she?" Jason gave a humorless laugh. "With Vanessa, I wouldn't bet on it." I didn't respond, because deep down, I already knew. People don't stay silent when they feel their identity slipping away. And Vanessa was losing control of the story she had been telling for years. That afternoon, it happened. My phone rang. Unknown number. But I knew. I answered. "Mom." Her voice was different again. Not angry this time, not defensive, strained. I saw the video. I continued washing dishes slowly, and pause. Then she spoke faster. "You made me look like a villain." I stopped moving. "That wasn't the intention." "It doesn't matter," she snapped. "People are attacking me everywhere." I turned off the faucet. "So now you understand how it feels." Silence. Long. Heavy. Then Vanessa exhaled sharply. "This isn't about feelings. This is about facts." I leaned against the counter. "Then let's talk about facts." Another pause. "You're turning this into something bigger than it is." I closed my eyes briefly. "No, Vanessa," I said quietly. "You made it bigger when you involved your father." That hit a nerve. "I didn't mean—" "You posted his letter?" I interrupted gently. "You used his words as a weapon." Her voice rose slightly. I was trying to explain context. Context doesn't require humiliation. Silence again. Then something unexpected happened. Her voice broke slightly. "Do you know what it's like," she whispered, "to feel like you never belong anywhere?" That stopped me completely. Not because it was new, but because I finally heard what had been underneath all of her behavior. Not arrogance, not superiority, but fear. Deep, long-standing fear. I sat down slowly at the kitchen table. Vanessa. I'm serious, she said quickly, like she needed to defend herself before I responded. In Chicago, everyone is polished. Perfect. They all have backgrounds that make sense. I stayed silent. And then, there's me, she continued. From Ohio, from a house with casseroles and secondhand furniture, and a mom everyone thinks is cute but old-fashioned. Her words hurt, but not the way they used to. Now they sounded like a confession, not an attack. I spoke softly. Is that what Ethan tells you? A pause. He doesn't say it directly. That was enough. I closed my eyes. So it wasn't just Vanessa. It was influence, reinforcement, echo chambers disguised as sophistication. I took a slow breath. You didn't have to reject where you came from to succeed. Yes, I did, she said immediately. No, I replied. You chose to. Silence. This one lasted longer. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter. I didn't want to be embarrassed anymore. That sentence sat heavily between us. Because now everything made sense. All the criticism, all the mocking, all the distance she created between herself and us. It wasn't confidence. It was armor. I looked down at the worn edge of the kitchen table. You were never embarrassing, Vanessa. She let out a bitter laugh. You don't understand what people see. I understand more than you think. A pause. Then she said something I didn't expect. Do you regret me? My heart tightened instantly. What if I'm so ashamed of where I came from? Do you regret raising me like this? My chest hurt in a way I couldn't explain, because the answer was no. Never. But I also understood why she asked. I chose my words carefully. No, Vanessa? A shaky breath on the other end. But I regret that you think love is something to be ashamed of. Silence again. This one felt different, less sharp, more fragile. Then she whispered, I didn't know how to be both. That broke something in me. Because that was the truth she had been circling for years. She didn't know how to be successful and still connected. Modern and still grounded. Confident and still vulnerable. Instead, she chose distance, then superiority, then criticism, then cruelty disguised as humor. I spoke softly. You never had to choose. Another silence. This one longer. Then suddenly Vanessa asked, why didn't you stop me sooner? That question hit harder than anything else. I looked around my kitchen, at the life I built, at the years I spent absorbing comments I should have challenged earlier. At the dinners I turned into performances just to keep peace. I thought I was keeping the family together, I said honestly. And now I exhaled slowly. Now I think I was just keeping myself from being alone. Silence. Then Vanessa whispered something I barely heard. I don't want to lose you. My throat tightened. For a moment, I didn't speak, because this was the first honest thing she had said in a long time. No defense, no performance, just fear. I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the street was quiet, ordinary, real. You don't have to lose me, I said gently. But you can't keep hurting me either. Another pause. I don't know how to fix this, she admitted. And for the first time, she sounded small, not powerful, not superior, just lost. I leaned against the window frame. Then start by stopping the fight. A breath on the other end. I can't undo everything. No, I agreed, But you can stop adding more damage. Silence. Then very quietly, what if people think I lost? I closed my eyes, and I finally understood the real fear behind everything. Vanessa wasn't just afraid of being wrong. She was afraid of being seen as ordinary again. I spoke softly. Vanessa, losing a fight isn't the same as losing yourself. That stayed between us for a long time. Then she whispered, I need time. I know. Another pause. Then, Mom, yes, I'm sorry. 2 words. Simple, but heavy. And for the first time in years, they felt real, not complete, not healing everything, but real enough to matter. I know, I said quietly. She didn't hang up immediately. Neither did I. We just stayed there in silence. Not enemies, not healed. Something in between. Human again. And for now, that was enough. Vanessa didn't come home that Sunday. For the first time in years, I didn't set an extra plate at the table. I told myself it was practical, not emotional. But when I placed the serving dishes down, I still felt the absence, like a physical weight in the room. Rachel noticed immediately. She's really not coming. I shook my head. No. Jason leaned back in his chair. Honestly, Mom, I think she needed time anyway. Time for what Rachel asked. Jason hesitated. To stop fighting ghosts. Nobody spoke after that. We ate dinner quietly, not uncomfortably, just differently. Less tension, more space. But the silence where Vanessa used to be still echoed. Later that evening, after Jason and Rachel left, I stood in the kitchen longer than usual. I kept expecting my phone to ring. It didn't. I told myself I was fine. But when I opened the refrigerator and saw the untouched leftovers, I realized something unsettling. For the first time, I wasn't angry at Vanessa. I was just unsure. Not of what she did, but of who she was becoming, and whether I still knew how to reach her. Monday morning, I woke up early as always. But instead of starting breakfast, I sat at the kitchen table staring at Margaret's old festival flyer still pinned to my fridge. The words felt different now. Local Legends Cook-Off. I ran my fingers along the edge of the paper. Then I made a decision. I called Margaret. She answered on the second ring. I was wondering when you'd call, she said immediately. I exhaled. I want to talk about something. A pause. Then her voice softened. I'm listening. I think I want to cook again, I said. Not for attention, not for validation, but for myself. There was silence on her end. Then she said, finally. That afternoon, I returned to the old Parker's kitchen again. The smell hit me instantly. Faint oil, metal, memory. It was like stepping into another version of my life. A version where I was still confident in my hands. Still certain of my worth. I tied my apron slowly. My fingers trembled slightly at first. But once I started chopping vegetables, something shifted. Memory returned muscle by muscle, heat by heat, step by step. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't hear Vanessa's voice in my head. I heard Thomas instead. Don't rush the stew, Nick. Let it speak for itself. I smiled faintly. I remember, I whispered. Hours passed without me noticing. When Margaret came in later, she stopped at the doorway. You look different, she said. I glanced up. How like yourself again? That sentence stayed with me longer than I expected, because I realized I had forgotten what that felt like. Meanwhile, Vanessa was still silent. No calls, no messages, no posts. Jason called me that evening. She hasn't been active online, he said. I know. She's off the radar completely. I stirred the pot slowly. Maybe she needs to be? A pause. Do you think she's okay? That question was harder than I expected, because I didn't know anymore. I think I said carefully she's trying not to be the version of herself everyone expects to see. Jason sighed. That sounds like her. But underneath his words, I heard concern. The kind only siblings feel when someone they love is falling apart quietly. 2 days later, I received a letter. Not email, not text. A real letter, handwritten. The envelope had Vanessa's name on the return address, but the handwriting was uneven, uncertain. I sat down at the kitchen table before opening it. My hands shook slightly. Inside was a single page. Short, raw. Mom, I didn't know how to say this without trying to defend myself, so I wrote it instead. I was wrong. Not about everything, but about enough. I think I spent so long trying to escape where I came from that I forgot it was also where I learned how to love. I see now that I hurt you more than I understood. And I don't know how to fix all of it yet. But I want to try. I don't expect things to go back to how they were. I don't think they can. I just don't want to keep running from you anymore. Vanessa, I read it twice, then a third time. My chest felt tight, but not painful, more like pressure finally releasing after years of holding it in. Rachel arrived while I was still holding the letter. She looked at my face immediately. Is it from her? I nodded. Jason leaned in closer. What does it say? I handed it to Rachel. She read it slowly. Jason watched her expression carefully. When she finished, she looked up. She's trying, she said softly. Jason exhaled. About time. But I didn't respond immediately because something else was happening inside me. I wasn't rushing toward forgiveness or reconciliation. I was just noticing something strange. The anger I had carried for so long wasn't as sharp anymore. Not gone, just quieter. Rachel sat beside me. So what now? I looked at the letter again. Then at the kitchen. At the table where Thomas used to sit. At the space Vanessa once filled. At the life we were all trying to rebuild in different ways. I don't know, I admitted. And for the first time, that uncertainty didn't feel like failure. It felt like space. Jason nodded slowly. Maybe that's okay? Later that night, after they left, I stood alone in the kitchen holding Vanessa's letter again. Outside, the street was quiet. The house wasn't empty anymore, but it wasn't fully whole either. It was something in between. Like us. I placed the letter on the table carefully, not closing the door, not opening it fully either, just leaving it there. And as I turned off the kitchen light, I realized something I never understood before. Healing doesn't arrive loudly. It doesn't fix everything at once. It simply begins the moment you stop pretending nothing is broken. The first time Vanessa came back to my house after everything, she didn't knock. She just stood on the porch. I saw her through the kitchen window while I was washing dishes. For a moment, I didn't move. Neither did she. She looked different. Not in appearance, but in presence. Less polished, less guarded. Like someone who had spent too long thinking instead of performing. Rachel was the first to notice. She's here, she said quietly. Jason looked up from the table. Finally. I wiped my hands slowly on a towel, then walked to the door. When I opened it, Vanessa didn't speak right away. Hi, Mom, she said finally. Her voice was smaller than I remembered. Hi, I replied. Silence stretched between us. Not hostile, just unfamiliar. She looked down briefly. I wasn't sure if I should come. I nodded slightly. I understand. That seemed to unsettle her more than anger would have, because I wasn't pushing her away. But I wasn't pulling her in either. Just standing there. Jason appeared behind me in the doorway. Rachel followed right after. The four of us stood in a strange stillness for a moment, like a family trying to remember its shape. Vanessa finally spoke. "I read your letter," she said quietly. "Thomas's letter." I felt my chest tighten slightly, and I asked gently. She swallowed. "I didn't understand a lot of things before." Jason crossed his arms, but didn't interrupt. Rachel stayed quiet. Vanessa continued. "I thought success meant distancing myself from everything that made me feel small." She gave a short, uncertain laugh. "But I think I confused small with familiar." Her eyes lifted to mine. "I didn't realize I was hurting you just to feel bigger." That honesty hit deeper than anything else she had ever said. Because it wasn't defensive. It wasn't justified. It was recognition. I stepped aside slightly. "Do you want to come in?" Vanessa hesitated, then nodded. Inside, she moved slowly through the kitchen like she was seeing it for the first time. The same cabinets. The same table Thomas built. The same space she once mocked without thinking. Jason watched her carefully. Rachel stood closer to me than usual. Vanessa finally sat down at the table. Not at the head, not confidently, just at a seat. "I don't know how to fix this," she admitted. Jason exhaled. "That's the first honest thing you've said in years." Rachel shot him a warning look, but Vanessa didn't react defensively. Instead, she nodded slightly. "I know." Silence again, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was waiting. I sat across from her. "Vanessa," I said softly. She looked up. "I don't need you to be perfect." Her eyes flickered. "But I do need you to stop hurting me." Her expression tightened immediately, like she felt the weight of that truth. "I didn't realize I was doing that," she whispered. "I think you did," Jason said quietly. "Just not how much." Vanessa didn't argue. That alone was different. She looked down at her hands. "I spent so long trying to prove I was different from where I came from," she said, "that I forgot I was still part of it." Rachel's voice softened slightly. "We never stopped being your family." Vanessa's breath shook a little. "I know that now." Silence followed, but it wasn't empty anymore. It was full of something fragile, possibility. Vanessa looked at me again. "I don't expect things to go back to normal?" I nodded. "That's good." A faint broken smile appeared on her face. "Because I don't think I know what normal is anymore." Jason leaned back slightly. "Start simple then." Vanessa looked at him. "Like what?" He shrugged. "Show up without trying to win anything." That made her pause. Then she nodded slowly. "I can try that." Rachel stood up suddenly. "Then stay for dinner." Vanessa blinked. Really, Rachel smiled faintly. "We already made too much food." I looked at the table, at the space between us, at what used to feel like a battlefield, slowly turning back into something else. "I made beef stew," I said quietly. Vanessa's eyes softened immediately. For a second, I saw her not as the woman she had become, but as the girl who once stood beside me in this very kitchen, stirring batter and laughing when she spilled flour everywhere. "I remember," she said softly. Jason groaned lightly. "Please don't get emotional yet. We haven't even eaten." That broke the tension just enough. A small laugh escaped Vanessa. Then Rachel laughed too. And suddenly, for the first time in a very long time, we were all in the same room without breaking each other. Dinner that night was quiet, not awkward, not tense, just careful. Vanessa didn't criticize. She didn't perform. She listened. She asked questions. She even helped set the table without being asked. At one point, Jason glanced at me across the table. I understood what he was thinking. This doesn't erase everything. And he was right. It didn't, but it was something. After dinner, Vanessa stood by the sink with me. I don't know how to do this part, she said quietly. Which part? I asked. Being here, without feeling like I have to prove something. I turned off the water. You don't have to prove anything to us. She nodded slowly, then looked at me. I'm sorry, Mom. Not defensive, not rehearsed. Just real. I studied her face for a long moment. Then I nodded. I know. She let out a slow breath like she had been holding it for years. I don't expect forgiveness right away. I shook my head slightly. That's not how it works anyway. A faint smile returned. Then what happens now? I looked around the kitchen, at Jason laughing softly with Rachel, at the table Thomas built, at the life that had been cracked but not destroyed. We start small, I said. Vanessa nodded. Okay. Later that night, after everyone left, I stood alone in the kitchen again. But it didn't feel empty this time. It felt repaired in places, not whole, not perfect, but no longer breaking. I touched the edge of the table gently, Thomas's table, and I whispered quietly, we're still here. Outside, the house stayed still, but inside me, something finally settled. Not closure, not an ending, but a beginning I no longer had to be afraid of. Standing in my kitchen that night after Vanessa left, I finally understood something I had spent years refusing to see clearly. Love inside a family is not always loud. It is not always gentle. And sometimes it is not even respectful in the way we expect it to be. But it is still love until it is replaced by pride, ego, and the need to be better than where you came from. For years, I thought endurance was the same as strength. I believed that if I kept Sunday dinners alive, kept the table full, kept the tradition going, then my family would stay whole. But I learned something painful. A family cannot survive on food alone. It cannot survive on routine alone. And it definitely cannot survive when one person keeps sacrificing their dignity just to maintain peace. Vanessa did not become distant overnight. It happened slowly through small comments, small humiliations, small moments where I chose silence instead of boundaries. I told myself I was being patient, but in truth, I was slowly disappearing inside my own kitchen, and Vanessa, in her own way, was also lost. She confused success with separation. She thought rejecting her roots meant becoming stronger, when in reality it only made her lonelier. Forgiveness did not happen in a single moment. It did not erase the past. It simply began when honesty finally replaced pride. I also learned something important about myself. I am not just a mother who cooks. I am a woman who once had passion, identity, and pride in what she created long before I started measuring my worth through someone else's approval. Healing did not mean going back to what we were. It meant accepting what we had become and choosing to rebuild anyway. Not perfectly, not instantly, but honestly. If this story touched your heart, I want to hear from you. Have you ever experienced distance, misunderstanding, or silent pain inside your own family? Please leave a comment and share your story. I read every single one. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next emotional family story. And tell me, where are you watching from? What time is it there right now? You are not alone in these feelings.